Welcome, students. Today we are going to be discussing isocolon and chiasmus and illustrating these rhetorical techniques with a couple examples from JFK's inaugural address and the Bible. Both isocolon and chiasmus have to do with the way that you organize information in a sentence or groups of sentences. Isocolon organizes that information in the same order, whereas chiasmus organizes one set of information and then the second set of information is in reverse order. So isocolon would structure things A, B, C, A, B, C, while chiasmus would structure things A, B, C, C, B, A. You can remember these names by thinking about the Greek origins of the words. Iso means same, and colon means limb, member, or part, and in rhetoric is generally used to refer to the parts of a phrase or the parts of a sentence. So isocolon happens when the grammatical parts are all in the same order. Chiasmus comes from the Greek letter chi, which is shaped like a big X. When you arrange the two halves of a chiasmus on top of each other like this, you can see the X. We can illustrate both techniques by using two quotes from JFK's inaugural address, which can be found in your textbook on pages 74 and 97. First, let's look at a case of isocolon, which happens pretty close to the beginning of the speech.
Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
Notice that we have three elements repeated A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C multiple times. The A element is always a punchy active verb. The B element is always the word any, and the C element is always a specific noun. Notice that this grammatical parallelism matches a parallelism of meaning. The ideas pay, bear, meet, support, and oppose all have to do with difficult action involving sacrifice. The first three sets state the cost of this sacrifice with the words price, burden, and hardship, while the last two sets contrast our allies and our enemies in the struggle with the words friend and foe. The expansion of JFK's ideas in this example of isocolon give him a chance to say what he means with concrete descriptive words. Just think about how much less effective this whole example would be if instead he had said, "Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we will do whatever it takes to assure the survival and the success of liberty." Next, let's look at a case of chiasmus, close to the very end of the speech, which is probably the most famous line in the whole thing.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Chiasmus can be used to accomplish several different rhetorical effects, such as communicating mutuality or reciprocity. Here, however, Kennedy uses it to really emphasize contrast. In other words, he drives home the statement of not X, but instead Y. And the reverse word order of the chiasmus helps to express that contrast in a way that is memorable and really sticks in your head. Notice, however, that that same catchiness of the phrase can also make chiasmus come off as a joke or a cliche if the context isn't right. So whenever you use this technique, you just need to check and read it over, read it out loud to yourself, and make sure that it doesn't sound silly. Now, if you go hunt for isocolon and chiasmus, you can find it used all over the place. You can find it in commercials, you can find it in ordinary everyday writing like emails and memos. You can find it in more serious contexts like this speech from JFK or in serious essays. But it has a special place in the Bible because Hebrew poetry is based on parallelism. Now, the Bible is important in its own right, but especially in the King James Version, it has also formed a major part of the English language and the history of English culture. And many catchphrases or rhythms from the King James Bible have worked their way into sort of the background of the English language as a whole. Many languages, such as English, German, Greek, Latin, separate poetry from prose based on things that are based on the sound of the words, such as rhyme and meter and assonance and those kinds of techniques. Hebrew is a little different, however. In Hebrew, poetry is expressed in lines where the line is broken down usually into two parts, sometimes three. And those parts are expressed in a parallel structure. In this case, isocolon or chiasmus. What the Hebrew poet will do is he will express an idea and then he will express that same idea again, and then sometimes a third time. But he changes the language up each time or emphasizes slightly different details. Sometimes he will elevate it the second and third time around. Every now and then, he will, instead of expressing the same idea, he will express two different ideas that are in contrast. Let's consider a few examples from the very famous 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. In the first line, the parallel is a little harder to see because the parallel is formed by contrast rather than restatement. The Lord is contrasted with the psalmist, and the Lord's caring for the psalmist is contrasted with the psalmist's being cared for by the Lord. The second line, however, is much simpler. He matches with he, maketh matches with leadeth, me matches with me, and in green pastures matches with beside the still waters. Notice that the extra words to lie down are really just part of the verbal idea involved in maketh. The last line illustrates an important technique called expansion, which helps to relax the tedium of several lines of parallel structures. In this line, he again matches with he, restoreth matches with leadeth, and my soul matches with me. At the end, however, the psalmist expands the line with two prepositional phrases, elaborating the thought and breaking up the rhythm. We can also find many good examples of isocolon and chiasmus in the New Testament. Although the New Testament was written in Greek rather than Hebrew, its authors grew up in this culture and were familiar with this kind of poetry. So many of the most beloved verses in the New Testament share this same kind of rhythm and parallelism. An especially good example can be found in the famous Golden Rule in Luke 6:31. And as ye would that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise. In this example, we have A, what should be done, B, other people, and C, you. In the JFK example, we saw how chiasmus can be used effectively to communicate contrast, but here we see that it can also be used effectively to communicate reciprocity, or the reversal of a relationship. I hope that these examples have helped you understand these two rhetorical techniques and given you a few ideas about how you might use them to structure your own writing in a slightly more organized way. Granted, you're probably not going to be writing any inaugural addresses anytime soon, but you might be surprised how much these two techniques can be used in ordinary everyday writing to communicate parallel ideas in an orderly fashion. In fact, try using one of these techniques in the next email you write. Just pick one sentence where you got a couple ideas that are related and try to either put the ideas in the same order using the same grammatical parts, or flip them around and put them in reverse order instead, whichever would be more appropriate. Try reading that sentence out loud to yourself to make sure that it doesn't sound catchy or cliche, and hopefully you end up with a slightly better result than you would have if you just wrote off the top of your head. That's all for Isocolon and Chiasmus. I will see you in the next video.